Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Kumanande Hari Hari Krishna Narottam Das Thakur ki jai. So today is a very special day. It's the appearance day of Shri Narottam Das Thakur. So we decided to base the class on his wonderful pastimes and all the lessons we can learn from his wonderful activities while he was on this planet. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on him, and I pray for all your blessings to do justice to this class. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 10, text 9. Machita Madgata Prana Bhodayantah Parasparam Katayanta Shamam Nityam Tushanti Cha Ramanti Cha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Purport. Pure devotees, whose characteristics are mentioned here, engage themselves fully in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Their minds cannot be diverted from the lotus feet of Krishna. Their talks are solely on the transcendental subjects. The symptoms of the pure devotees are described in this verse specifically. Devotees of the Supreme Lord are 24 hours daily engaged in glorifying the qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Their hearts and souls are constantly submerged in Krishna, and they take pleasure in discussing him with other devotees. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, they relish the transcendental pleasure from the service itself, and in the mature stage, they are actually situated in love of God. Once situated in that transcendental position, they can relish the highest perfection which is exhibited by the Lord in his abode. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental devotional service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. There are innumerable living entities traveling throughout the different planets of the universe, and out of them there are few who are fortunate enough to meet a pure devotee and get the chance to understand devotional service. This devotional service is just like a seed, and if it is sown in the heart of a living entity, and if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, that seed fructifies just as the seed of a tree fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahmajyoti effulgence in the spiritual sky. In that spiritual sky, that plant grows more and more until it reaches the highest planet, which is called Goloka Vrindavan, supreme planet of Krishna. Ultimately, the plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and rests there. Gradually, as a plant grows fruits and flowers, that plant of devotional service also produces fruits, and the watering process in the form of chanting and hearing goes on. This plant of devotional service is fully described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 19. It is explained there that when the complete plant takes shelter under the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, one becomes fully absorbed in love of God. Then he cannot live even for a moment without being in contact with the Supreme Lord, just as a fish cannot live without water. In such a state, the devotee actually attains the transcendental qualities in contact with the Supreme Lord. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Chakshuramitanena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Upakadamahyam Dadati Swapadantam Ma Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Charine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vasyati Deshitarini. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining the process of devotional service, and he's also describing how someone who is in the transcendental state will develop the extraordinary qualities of the Supreme Lord because of being in contact with him all the time. So when we're discussing Srila Narottam Das Thakur right from the beginning of his life, he was a pure devotee, and thus he always exhibited these transcendental qualities. So this is what we will discuss today, and how we can learn from him how to practically apply these transcendental qualities in our lives. So we touched on his pastimes briefly in one of our previous classes. So today we'll go a little bit in depth into what we can learn from him. So in sorry, Srila Das Thakur appeared today in the month of Magh, which is the Purnim day. So the Purnim is associated with the auspicious culminations, and so he was coming into this world already a pure devotee. His devotional service already being developed to its height, and throughout his life, this theme of Purnim will be played out as we will see. And the month of Magh is also a very auspicious month, as auspicious as Kartik and Vaishakha it's described. So the area that he appeared in is the village is called Kituri, and it's in the Rajshahi district of Bangladesh. He was actually born to a very opulent family because his father was a very rich zamindar. He was actually considered king, Raja Krishna Nanda Datta. And as such, he was always surrounded. Narottam Das Thakur was always surrounded by opulence, even from the very moment of his birth. Yet it never influenced his personality at all. Narottam Das Thakur was completely devoted to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda from his very birth. And so he always acted as a humble servant of the Lord. So, the formula of how to do this is given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says in Madhya Leela, chapter 13, text 80, Naham Vipro Nacha Narapati Napi Vaishuna Shudro Naham Parni Nacha Vihapir Nuvanashtuyatirva Kintu Prodya Nikila Paramananda Purnamritabder Gopi Partuhu Padakamalayora Dasta Sanadasaham. So the translation of this verse is, I am not a Brahmin, I am not a Kshatriya, I am not a Vaishya or a Shudra, nor am I a Brahmachari, a householder, a Vanaprastha or a sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. So Lord Chaitanya is teaching us in this verse that even if we are like Narottam Das Thakur and we have the situation of opulence, that we must always remember that we are the servants of the servants of the servants of Krishna, that everything belongs to him, that everything is meant to be humbly used in his service. And having this mentality, we can certainly make the best use of whatever opulence we have. We have to remember that humility is the only way in which we can attain the mercy of the Supreme Lord through chanting his holy names. That is the reason why the Lord Chaitanya has told us in the Sri Shikshashtakam that humility is something, if we develop, that will allow us to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So it means that that humility extends to us thinking of everybody as our master, not even just who we would think of traditionally as devotees of Krishna, because everybody's a devotee of Krishna. Everyone is eternally, constitutionally the eternal servant of the Lord. It's just as Srila Prabhupada has told us, some don't realize it. So as such, we are actually the servants of everyone. And we need to remind ourselves that throughout the day, when we come into conflicting situations, when we're upset about something that didn't go our way, when we're trying to decide whether we should greet somebody, whether there's praise or blame applied to any situation. At all times, we should think, what would Lord Chaitanya do in this situation? We always have those few seconds in order to have such thoughts come into our mind and then act accordingly. This will make a big difference to getting very good outcomes, spiritual outcomes for all these difficult situations that we face in the material world. So Narottam Das Thakur was such a perfectly humble Vaishnav that he touched the hearts of everybody that he met. His kingdom, he was loved by everyone in his kingdom, and his family expected thus that he would become a very great ruler. It was actually predicted at his birth that he would become a great spiritual leader or a great king. So this trait of being loved by all, this is something that's shared by great Vaishnavas. Srila Prabhupada used to often quote the first verse of the Sad Goswami Ashtakam by Srila Srinivasacharya that described the six Goswamis as Dhira Dhira Jana Priya Karo Nirmatsaro Pujito. They were popular with the Dhira and the Adhira, with both the gentle and the ruffians. And this was because of this extraordinary quality they had. They were not envious. When one isn't envious, that energy is picked up actually by others. And even if people have this natural enmity towards us, they can't help but admire and respect us for humbly and gently trying to preach the holy names of the Lord. And so we could win over a lot of people by developing this quality of non-enviousness, just like the six Goswamis and Narottam Das Thakur. We must always remember that we are the representatives of Krishna, that a master is known by his servants, and that by our good behavior, we are enhancing the reputation of the Supreme Lord to the common person who doesn't know the Lord. And this will greatly assist us in our preaching as well. We can always get through to the hearts of people when our behavior is in the following in the footsteps of the six Goswamis and Srila Narottam Das Thakur. So obviously, Narottam Das Thakur's destiny was more important than just becoming the king, although he would have been an extraordinary king. He was meant to be one of the greatest preachers of his time, following the footsteps of the six Goswamis. So there's a special pastime as to how he became empowered to perform this extraordinary destiny. Long before his appearance, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had been ecstatically engaged in kirtan, and he began to call out the name of Narottam repeatedly. And Lord Nityananda had asked him, who is this Narottam? And Lord Chaitanya said to Lord Nityananda, my Lord, you do not know your own glories. When we went to Jagannath Puri, you shed tears out of divine love day after day. I managed to capture your love and save it. Now I wish to keep it here by the Padmavati river of Narottam Das. And of course, we know in this pastime that Lord Chaitanya approached the Padmavati river, gave her this pure love of Godhead, and told her to keep it for Narottam Das Thakur. So Narottam Das so Narottam Das, the river Padmavati, personality of the river, the goddess, she asked Lord Chaitanya, how would I know that Narottam Das Thakur is coming into my waters? And Lord Chaitanya explained to her that her waters would overflow. So when this happened, this particular pastime of Narottam Das Thakur receiving love of God, he was actually just 12 years old. Lord Nityananda appeared to him within a dream and told him to go to the Padmavati river and receive this treasure that had been left for him. So when Narottam Das Thakur received the love of Godhead that Lord Chaitanya had left, he became completely transformed. He already had the markings of a Mahapurush, a great personality on his body. He had lotus-like eyes and long arms and such. But now his appearance also changed in terms of he became golden in color with love of God. So this is not something that can be easily explained by material science. But we know that the elements that this body is made of, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, these are all energies of Krishna. So when these material energies are in contact with spiritual energy of love of God, then these apparently material energies become spiritual, and they'll be able to change their characteristics. We've seen that in a completely spiritual body of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he was able to do some extraordinary things when he was in ecstatic love of Godhead. His arms would elongate. He would actually pour blood from his pores, and sometimes he would rise high into the air and crash to the ground with such a thunderous sound, but yet his gentle and soft body would not show any signs of injury. So this is not easy to understand by a material scientific viewpoint, but um, we can understand that when there's spiritual ecstasy is within a body, then that body is completely transformed as well. So in the same way, when Prabhupada was on this planet, we know there was a famous pastime where he was on the, he was during, it was during a street festival, and um, a police officer, in great surprise, grabbed one of the devotees and said, "Just look at your leader; he's glowing." So the body of the spiritual master, the body of a pure devotee, they're not ordinary because of their pure spiritual energy, their pure love of Krishna, being constantly in the association of Krishna, transforms their body to something that is completely spiritual as well. So when Narottam Das Thakur underwent this extraordinary change in his personality and in his body, his parents were extremely concerned because they understood that with these spiritual transformations, he wasn't going to stay with them for very much longer. So they employed a guard in order to keep watch on him so that he wouldn't run away. So we know that this is not something that would work on a spiritual personality, a material constraint. And Narottam Das Thakur was able to escape. And what is significant about this is the theme of Purnim that comes again. He escaped his home on the Kartik Purnim, and he, of course, left for Vrindavan. So on his way there, he was so absorbed in his ecstasies of love of Godhead that he was simply crying when he was chanting the holy names of the Lord, and he wasn't even thinking about his external condition and how he was getting injured walking barefoot. He had to take the hidden road so he wouldn't be discovered by his family, and he wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't eating and he wasn't drinking. So there's a lovely pastime where a golden-skinned Brahmin, who we can imagine was, appeared to him and gave him an Nectarian milk and told him that this milk would cure him of all his injuries and his bruises that he had received while he was walking. And later on that evening, he had a dream of Srila Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis, who had fed him that milk, which was actually delivered by Lord Chaitanya himself. So many times the Lord has promised, and people may question, when he makes this promise that he'll deliver what his devotees need, does he actually do it? And the Lord is so extraordinary that even though he has many energies, multifarious energies that can deliver anything that he needs to a devotee, the Lord takes a special pleasure in rendering that service to his devotee. And that attitude is always described as a loving competition between the Lord and his devotees. The Lord is trying to serve his devotees, the devotee is trying to serve the Lord. So the Lord did not have to come personally to deliver that milk to Narottam Das Thakur, but he did it in fulfillment of what he tells us in Bhagavad Gita. Yogakshem Vahamyaham. He personally carries what his devotees need. And another extraordinary feature of this is that the Lord doesn't wait for us to even ask for what he needs, what we need from him. He knows what we need for our devotional service, for our advancement. He knew that Narottam Das Thakur needed to keep his body and soul together for his future services. So he came even without being asked to deliver. And that kind of personal care from the Supreme Lord, it's not attained by just any religious process or any spiritual practice. It's only through devotional service that we can develop such an extraordinary relationship with the Supreme Lord. So after this, Narottam Das Thakur continued on refreshed to Vrindavan, where he took shelter of Srila Jiva Goswami, who was at that time the head of all the Vaishnavas. And Srila Jiva Goswami instructed instructed Narottam Das Thakur to take initiation from Lokanath Goswami. So what is interesting about this is that Lokanath Goswami was by then very old, very isolated from everyone. And he was just practicing his spiritual life in great sorrow and separation because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had disappeared. So in this condition, in his great humility, he didn't want to accept any disciples. As he had told Narottam Das Thakur, he himself did not feel qualified to render any services to Sri Srinivasa Gaura. How would he accept service from a disciple? So despite being rejected, Sri Narottam Das Thakur took it on his life that he would have to somehow please Lokanath Goswami and serve him. He would go every night at midnight and clean the ablution area that Lokanath Goswami was using. So we have to consider this. This is a prince who was not only raised in very opulent conditions, but has come all the way on foot from this very far province to receive this transcendental knowledge. And he is being told, being rejected by the person that, and deciding that Lokanath Goswami was so ungrateful. He gives up his sleep every night for a year to go and clean the ablution area of all things of the same personality who rejected him. He would actually hold the broom that he was using to sweep to his chest, saying in happiness, "This is the power that will help me attain my Lord's lotus feet." This is not something that we can even conceive of, because many of us, if not all of us, would not be able to express such humility. But again, like we remember the verse of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shikshashtakam, Chanarapi Sunichana, Tarorapi Shahishnana, Manina Managana, Chaitanya Stahari. This humility, this tolerance, this lack of false prestige, and this need to offer respect to everyone. This is what is so essential to be a good disciple, to be a constant chant of the holy name, to make progress in spiritual life. We also know from Bhagavad Gita that these two processes, pariprashna and sevaya, inquiring submissively, humbly again, and rendering service humbly, these two are required for one to get spiritual knowledge. So when Lokanath Goswami found out about Narottam Das Thakur's activities by secretly observing him, he was so moved by his disciple's humility that he accepted him as a disciple and initiated him. And this, again, the theme of the Purnim, happened on the Shravan Purnim. When Narottam Das Thakur had received initiation and received great knowledge and instruction from Srila Jiva Goswami at his world-renowned school of Vaishnava studies, his Tola in Vrindavan, he was fully equipped for his mission in life. So Narottam Das Thakur became one of Srila Jiva Goswami's three most powerful students, the glorious second generation after the six Goswamis, who spread Krishna consciousness in extraordinary ways, many great adventures, as we also touched on previously. So these three extraordinary personalities, Srila Srinivasacharya, Srila Narottam Das Thakur, and Srila Shyamananda Pandit, were all Shaktis of the Supreme Lord, of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and Advaita Acharya, respectively. And as such, there was nothing extraordinary about their pastimes. We know that Srinivasacharya's birth was predicted by Lord Chaitanya himself, that Shyamananda Pandit received a direct darshan of Srimati Radharani. He received the new name, the special tilak, and the wonderful deity of the Lord manifested from her beautiful heart directly. And of course, Narottam Das Thakur, I mean, his entire life was filled with amazing mercy of the Lord, but particularly receiving pure love God at the age of 12, specifically left behind. Those are yet there was no envy among them all. There was no competition that, oh, I got a vision of Radharani, and oh, I've gotten love of Godhead already. There was nothing like that. These three personalities, they were just humbly focused on serving their Shiksha Guru, Srila Jiva Goswami, and fulfilling the mission that was destined for them by the Supreme Lord. We have to understand that this quality of non-enviousness, again, it's going to come up in a few other pastimes of Narottam Das Thakur. It's so essential to our spiritual life because the mercy of the Lord, it's so extraordinary that everybody can receive whatever they need for spiritual life without encroaching on somebody else. If someone is getting a benediction from the Lord, it doesn't mean that we can't get a benediction that we need. It doesn't have to be the same because, like we said also earlier, the Lord's care and affection for us is individual. He knows what each of us needs. It's not the same as the next person. If we're sticking to our path and knowing that our paths are individual, then we won't be comparing ourselves constantly to the next person or the next devotee and trying to have what they have. We will trust what the Lord gives us and we will try to utilize it sincerely in His service. And that's what these three devotees were doing. They were simply focusing on using whatever mercy the Lord had granted them in His service for His pleasure, not for their own glorification. And that's why they were so successful. We must just be focused that the Lord will give us exactly what we need for our spiritual life, as He gives other people what they need for their spiritual lives. And we should always be happy for the good fortune of others. So, there's another important point that I wanted to touch on. So we know that Narottam Das Thakur was given this amazing love of God. So why did he need to come to a Tola and take initiation? He already had love of God. So once again, we come to this point that accepting a spiritual master and getting instruction from that spiritual master is necessary for anyone and everyone, whether it's a beginner in spiritual life or a pure devotee like Narottam Das Thakur. If we were given, just for argument's sake, love of God right now, if we were put into Goloka, would we know what to do? Would we know where to go? Would we know how to please Krishna? Certainly, most of us, if not all of us, know, because learning about pleasing the Supreme Lord is not something that's so straightforward. Even the gopis, who are the highest associates of the Lord, pure devotees and revered everywhere, they have a guru. They have Srimati Lalita Devi. They have to take instructions from her on how to please Radha and Krishna. So all kinds of extraordinary devotees across the universe are taking instruction from the spiritual masters all the time. And so Narottam Das Thakur also set that example. Despite having received love of Godhead, he accepted a spiritual master, a Diksha Guru and a Shiksha Guru actually, and thus he was able to perfect his mission in this life. So back to our three heroes. Now that they were given, now that they were completely educated by Srila Jiva Goswami, they were given a great task to take all the writings of the six Goswamis to Bengal and Orissa, where the devotee population required all these spiritual books in order to increase and enhance their devotional activities. We touched on this past and previously as well, that the books were stolen. And while Srinivasacharya stayed behind, Narottam Das Thakur and Shamananda Pandit went on for their respective preaching activities. So Narottam Das Thakur was sent to Keturi Gram, which is where he came from, because his spiritual master understood that because of his high position there, because of his pure devotion, because of his great knowledge, he would be able to be the best person to preach Lord Chaitanya's mission in that town. Now, of course, Narottam Das Thakur had a great longing to be with his spiritual master, but the separation was necessary because the higher principles that he had a service to perform. Sometimes we also feel like that. We feel like we would rather be within our spiritual master's presence and then rendering close service to him. But if we have an instruction to render service away from our spiritual master, we shouldn't think that this means that we're in a lower position or that we're doing something less. We have many extraordinary examples in Gaudiya history, in Vaishnav history, that separation is actually the highest way of rendering service. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, they were the greatest associates of the Lord and loved by him the most out of all, but they spent probably the least time with him compared to the residents of Dwarka, for example. And they lived like more than 100 years of when the Lord was on this planet away from him. Similarly, Lord Chaitanya sent his greatest associates away. When he went to Jagannath Puri, Lord Nityananda and Advaitacharya went with him. They were in Bengal. He sent Lokanath Goswami and Bhugarba Goswami away to Vrindavan. He also sent the six Goswamis there after a while. He told Tapanishra to stay in Varanasi and so on. And he gave the instruction to the Brahmin Kurma in South India when he wanted to give up his home and follow Lord Chaitanya. He said, "Don't speak like that again. Better to remain at home and chant Krishna always." So the instruction of Lord Chaitanya to this Brahmin is instruction of Guru, even if it means not being able to be in their personal presence, and render our services sincerely. And the super soul will not only keep the spiritual master informed of our activities, but we will also make the greatest advancement by the service and separation. So Narottam Das Thakur did the same. He went to Keturi and he performed some amazing pastimes and established love of Godhead everywhere. He among his greatest pastimes in Keturi is the famous Keturi festival. So um, when he had left Keturi, his paternal cousin, Santosh, had taken over the kingdom. So when Narottam Das Thakur came back, his family, including King Santosh, they welcomed him with open arms, and the king desired very much to see initiation from him, and he set about to. So this beautiful temples that were installed there. And when this temple was opened, you can imagine it was a Purnim again. This time, Gur Purnim. And that festival, the famous Keturi festival, is comparable. It's described only to the Rajasuya sacrifice of Vishnu Maharaj. It was full of opulence, beauty, devotion, and joy. It was celebrated for miles around. So many, many great Vaishnavas and Acharyas, poets, singers, pandits, dancers, everybody was invited. Many people came from far and wide. And Narottam Das Thakur again was setting another example, this time of deity worship. It is necessary that the Acharya establishes a deity because it is through the Acharya, Srila Prabhupada says, calling the Lord into the deity that the deity actually becomes the outer incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So that is one of the duties of an Acharya. And the service and worship of the Lord's form as the Acharya Vigraha is also, the example is also set by the Acharya. In the Guru Vastakam, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes in the third verse, Shivigrahara Danam Tinanam, Shingaratanam Deramajana, Vikasi Bhaktam Stranyam, Vidopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam. Surashmas is always engaged in temple worship of Radha and Krishna, engages his disciples in that worship. They dress the deities, they clean the temple, they perform all kinds of worship for the Lord. So taking care of deities is also a form of preaching because establishing beautiful temples and attracting people to come and adore the form of the Lord. This is keeping them exposed to Krishna consciousness and engaged in the service of the Lord. So this amazing festival was celebrated with great magnificence. And the wonderful event that happened then, amongst all the other wonderful things that happened, was that after the main installation of the six deities, Sri Gauranga, Sri Vallabhikanta, Sri Krishna, Sri Rajendra Mohan, Sri Radharaman, and Sri Radhakanta, these six sets of deities were installed. After that, Janava Devi, who was presiding over the festival, she's the Shakti of Lord Nityananda, his second wife, she instructed Narottam Das Thakur to lead kirtan. And this is very special because he had a unique style of kirtan. And that extraordinary kirtan was resonating throughout the universe. And it was so powerful that it brought down Lord Chaitanya and his associates into that festival. And the Lord and his associates were actually dancing among the participants. So the next day, Janava Mata herself cooked the feast. This was pure nectar. All the devotees were fed to their full satisfaction, and then they left. Later, another pair of deities were added to this wonderful set of deities that Narottam Das Thakur had already installed. This pastime was also very interesting. There was a Brahmin named Vipradas who lived in a village called Gopalpur. And when Narottam Das Thakur visited him, this Brahmin relayed that in his rice storehouse, there was a large and terrifying snake, such that the Brahmin would not go near that place. Narottam Das Thakur just smiled and went to the storehouse, throwing the door open. Not only was there no snake, but there was a pair of beautiful deities of Srimati Vishnupriya Devi and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who he installed in Keturi as well. So Narottam Das Thakur's glory and fame was spreading. His writings were and still are extraordinary. Two of the best known to us are Prarthana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika, which are described to contain love of Godhead. That is where many of his beautiful songs are coming from, which we are able to relish and which we are able to use in our own devotional service in order to attract the mercy of the Lord. That is the mercy of Narottam Das Thakur to us even today. So still, though, he faced a lot of opposition from his the residents of Kituri, particularly the Brahmins, because Narottam Das Thakur had appeared in what was considered a lower class family. And this, of course, was done deliberately. Again, one of the lessons that he teaches us. Just as Haridas Thakur had appeared in a Muslim family, which was considered um, untouchable and lower class to the Brahmins at the time. Yet he was made Namacharya and he was given the highest respect by the Supreme Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya, and the devotees. So, in the same way, Narottam Das Thakur was one of the greatest Vaishnavas, Acharyas, and teachers of his time. And he was given the most extraordinary respect again by the Lord, by his own Shakti Janava Mata. But the Brahmins just could not accept that. So, we know from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings and his pastimes as well when he defeated the assembly of Brahmins, that the special mission of the Lord is to prove that being a Vaishnav makes one higher than a Brahmin actually. And in that way, anyone who becomes a Vaishnav, the caste distinctions just fall away. They don't persist anymore. So Narottam Das Thakur's pastimes in this regard were to teach these Brahmins very powerful lessons. So we'll go through a few of them quickly. Once Narottam Das Thakur was passing by the school of a very learned Brahmin, and this Brahmin started insulting out of course, complete envy for Narottam Das Thakur's great successes in his preaching and his knowledge and his kirtan, started criticizing him to his students. And he did this over and over and over again, calling Narottam Das Thakur a Shudra, fourth class person. So after that, this Brahmin was afflicted by leprosy so badly that his body was actually melting away. And he was in so much agony that he wanted to throw himself into the Ganga and end his life. So later that night, another common theme that we'll see through these next few pastimes, Durga Devi herself appeared to him because many of these Mata Brahmins were actually devotees of Durga Devi, and she chastised him. She called him a fool and told him that because of his insults to this great devotee, Narottam Das Thakur, this is why he was suffering. So she suggested that instructed him to take shelter of Narottam Das Thakur. And when he did, not only was his leprosy cured, but he became a pure devotee. So there was another pastime in this regard, Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj. Ramachandra Kaviraj was a very close associate of Narottam Das Thakur. He was a disciple of Srinivasacharya. So one day they both went to the river Padmavati to bathe, and they encountered two young Brahmin boys. These boys were herding a lot of goats and sheep, which were meant to be used for a sacrifice for Durga Devi by their father, who was a great Brahmin. So Narottam Das Thakur gave these boys instructions on spiritual knowledge, how they should not be sacrificing animals, how they should surrender to the Supreme Lord. And they were very moved by this and his blessings. So they took initiation from Narottam Das Thakur and Ramachandra Kaviraj. So this greatly infuriated their father, who came looking for them. When the boys returned home, he thought that he could convince them, but the local pandits were no match for these two boys. So their father thought of bringing another Mahapandit from Mithila in order to convince them. But this Pandit was also roundly defeated by these two boys, who simply prayed to their Guru and were able to answer all kinds of arguments that were thrown at them. So this father of this great Brahmin, that also chastised him and said that the Lord, Sri Hari, he's the master of everyone. He's the way, the truth, and the light. Those whom he covers with ignorance turn to my worship, and I assure the destruction of those who worship me. Those who aren't Krishna-minded are demons. On the other hand, those who are dear devotees of Krishna are really dear to me. For your own sake, if you want to become free from the offenses you have committed and attain auspiciousness, you had better go to Narottam Das Thakur and beg forgiveness from his lotus feet. Otherwise, I will destroy you, you offender of Vaishnavas. And needless to say, after she chastised him like this, he also took shelter in Narottam Das Thakur. Then she appeared to another Brahmin named Jagannatacharya and told him as well, although he had been her devotee, to take shelter of Narottam Das Thakur. So all of these wonderful occurrences, how Narottam Das Thakur was converting so many people to Vaishnavism all throughout Kituri, it raised so much of a disturbance among that Brahmin community that eventually they went to the king, Raja Raja Narsingha, and they had asked him to assist them in defeating Narottam Das Thakur, saying that he was a threat to their Brahmin culture, and so the king would suffer if the Brahmins were suffering. So the king, not understanding the glories of Narottam Das Thakur fully, he gave his support to these Brahmins and asked them what their plan was. And once again, they also thought of bringing the greatest of the Digvijayas at the time, or learned scholars, because the general principle was that great scholars would challenge other great scholars, and if they defeated, whoever was defeated became the disciple of the other. So the thinking was that if they could defeat Narottam Das Thakur, then him and all his disciples would become um, the disciples of the Brahmins again. Everything would go back to normal as they desired. So the king gave them support, and they decided to travel to Keturi with this big party of Brahmins and this Raja Pandit, and to basically defeat Narottam Das Thakur. So Ramachandra, Narottam Das Thakur and Ganga had this plan, and they thought of how to stop this party in their tracks. So what they heard was that party of the Brahmins and this Pandit and the king who was accompanying them, they would be stopping at a town called Kumarapur just before Keturi. They would stay there overnight and then travel to Keturi. So Ramachandra Kaviraj and Ganga Narayan Chakravarti, they went there to Kumarapur. They disguised themselves as lower class people, as a pot seller and a pan seller, and they set up shop there. So when the Pandits came by, and although they were just coming for supplies, they set up camp there overnight before Keturi. They were actually surprised that these two apparently fourth class people were not only so well versed in Sanskrit, which was considered to be the preserve of the very educated, but these two personalities started defeating them in all kinds of logic. So there was such an uproar created that eventually, when the king and this great Pandit that was supposed to defeat Narottam Das Thakur, his name was Rupa Narayan. When they came by, they not only realized that these two simple vendors were defeating the Pandits, they also these two vendors also defeated Rupa Narayan. So at this, the king was very alarmed, and he found out that these two personalities were, as they claimed, disciples of Narottam Das Thakur. So he confronted the Pandits that if these two persons who are fourth class, considered fourth class, if they are defeating you, what's going to happen when you encounter Narottam Das Thakur? So with this in mind, all the Pandits packed up their stuff and went back. So that night, once again, Durga Devi appeared to Rupa Narayan and the king, Raja Narsingha, chastised them roundly and told them to take shelter of Narottam Das Thakur, which they did. So after all these amazing pastimes, Narottam Das Thakur eventually brought activities on this earth to a close. But once again, the Brahmins, the envious Brahmins, were there to criticize that Narottam Das Thakur had passed away because his offenses to the Brahmins. So because his body had not yet been in Samadhi, his disciples had prayed to him that, please come and, these talks are giving us a lot of pain. So please do something. At which point, Narottam Das Thakur came back to life by his own sweet will. And these Brahmins were once again humbled, and they admitted their defeat. So he continued his pastimes for another year or so longer, and then he disappeared in quite an extraordinary way. Amidst a roaring kirtan on the banks of the Padmavati River, he, within the river, asked his disciples to massage his body, and his body actually melted like milk into the water. So they collected some of that water, and that's what's preserved in his samadhi at Radhagokulananda Temple in Vrindavan. And this is extraordinary life of Srila Narottam Das. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about him. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the wonderful class. We will request Her Grace Bhaktin Korita Paul Mataji, if you'd like to say a few words. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you very much, dear Mataji, for wonderful, amazing pastimes of Narottam Thakur. Thus, I have one question. If we are acting in charity and we are helping not a devotee, of course we are all, like you say, devotees of the Lord, but maybe they didn't wake this consciousness for Krishna, and if we are helping them, we are not doing offensive or
Sorry,
taking
you mean
karma.
helping? You mean
Yes,
helping them in general
and
or
giving
helping
in
them
charity,
in general?
helping in charity, in
Oh,
general.
charity.
Yes.
So sometimes charity, we can we're advised that we should give the charity to those who are um, like going to utilize it in a spiritual way. So that's like charity in cash, basically, like like money, because they would use it for spiritual purposes. But if we're assisting them charitably with prasadam, for example, because Prabhupada established Food for Life to distribute prasadam indiscriminately to everybody, people who are not devotees. This is a spiritual act. So this kind of charity is very much encouraged. So if we're helping them, helping anybody by giving them what they can utilize in a spiritual way, so taking prasadam is an act of service, then that's definitely encouraged. So maybe as much as possible, we can try and do that kind of charity rather than giving anybody money. But also, we have some charitable arms of ISKCON, like the Bhaktivedanta Hospital, that does a lot of services, a lot of camps, because by generally creating a nice and favorable environment within people's minds as good representatives of Krishna, who are compassionate and who can extend our help where we can, we're also making people very favorable to taking to Krishna consciousness and to rendering service to Krishna. So yeah, I think that if we can do charity like that in terms of in terms of acts of kindness and giving them prasad, then that would be very good for their spiritual life. Rather, it doesn't just mean charity is money, which is not something that we're advised to just donate anywhere, rather to keep for spiritual activities. Is that
Thank you,
okay?
Mataji. Yes, thank you very much. That means we haven't to give them money because we don't know how this money will be used.
Yeah,
I understand. Thank you very much.
yeah.
My
Donating
Pranam.
prasadam, donating clothes, donating our assistance, like I said, in terms of, if we have a profession where we can do some charitable work, like you in the law field, like me in the medical field, that's all part of our duty to do. So that is fine. That should be acceptable.
Thank you very much. My Pranam.
Hare Krishna Maji, thank you so much. We request Bhaktin Roger Watt. Prabhu, thank you so much for joining us and supporting our program. Hare Krishna Prabhu, did you enjoy the class?
Hare Krishna, yes, thank you very much. Natiji, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna. We hope you could join us again, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Majid, if there's no other questions or comments, we can have some kirtan if you don't mind. Malaji, I just want to ask one quick question. You mentioned Srila Narottam Das Thakur. Who was he in his previous birth? You said in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna?
Radha and Krishna. So his eternal identity is as a Manjari. He's Champaka Manjari.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So he is, yeah. So how we're taught is that we're all coming in a line of our service. So he's in the line of Rupa Manjari. So he serves Rupa Manjari, who serves Lalita, who serves Radha. So nobody's always, nobody just jumps to serving Krishna. Everyone serves through a succession. So he is the servant of the servant of the servant in that way. Champaka Manjari.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll sing a bhajan in honor of Narottam Das Thakur. This bhajan is written by him. This is very sweet bhajan. E Boro Karana Guru. ए भार करुणा करो वैष्णव गोसाई ए भार करुणा करो वैष्णव गोसाई पतित पावना तुम्हारी देवनाय पतित पावना तुम्हारी देवनाय Yaharani kaate dile papa durga Yaharani kaate dile papa durga Emonu dulala kabu Deva Kotapa Evanadayala Prabhu Deva Kotapa Gangara Paharashana Hoile Pashati Pavan Gangara Parasha Hoile Pashate pavan darshane pavitra karo eko mandaram darshane pavitra karo eko mandaram Hari stane aparate tare hari naam Hari stane aparate tare hari naam Tumastane aparate nahi paritram Tumastane aparate nahi paritram Tumhara hridoye sadhan Govinda Vishram Tumhara hridoye sadhan Govinda Vishram Govinda Govinda Mura Vaishnava Paran Govinda Govinda Mura Vaishnava Paran Prati Janme Kori Asha Narane Radhuri Prati Janme Kori Asha Narane Radhuri Narottam Koro Doya Apanara Bhori Narottam Koro Doya Apanara Bhori Jaya Vaishnava Thakur 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 Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Translation. O Vaishnav Goswami, please be merciful to me now. There is no one except you who can purify the fallen souls. Where does anyone find such a merciful personality by whose mere audience all sins go far away? After bathing in the waters of the sacred Ganges many times, one becomes purified, but just by the sight of you, the fallen souls are purified. This is your great power. The holy name delivers one who has committed an offense to Lord Hari, but if one commits an offense to you, there is no means of deliverance. Your heart is always the resting place of Lord Govinda. Lord Govinda says, the Vaishnavas are in my heart. I desire the dust of your holy feet in every birth I may take. Please consider Narottam yours and be kind to one another. Thank you again so much for your kind attendance. Shri Narottam Das Thakur ki jai, Shri Narottam Das Thakur Abhibhav Mahotsav ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shantai Gautam Nandi Hari Hare Krishna.